Hey, welcome everybody to the Fantasy Grill. I'm Anthony K, aka Fluent. You can find me at sports_fluent on TikTok, Twitter, and IG. This week, we're going to go through the top performers in NFL fantasy last week and let you know who's for real, who's pretend. We're going to go through the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the wide receivers, the positions that you've been asking about most. Plus, we're going to do a couple of start and sits. I'm going to give you one solid start and one that you should stay away from this week for your quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. So let's kick it off with our top performers from last week at the quarterback position. At number one, actually maybe a little bit of surprise because they lost the game, was Lamar Jackson, followed up by his counterpart who ended up having 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in Tua Tagovailoa. The third place finisher, however, might be a surprise to some, but again, the same reason we like Lamar Jackson in fantasy is the reason we like Jalen Hurts. He can now that he has weapons in Philadelphia, beat you with his arm. AJ Brown is also having a good season, but he can also beat you with his legs. Jalen Hurts was third in fantasy points last week, so you had Lamar Jackson, Tua, and Jalen Hurts. The one that I want you to watch out for, and we know why, is the guy who finished in fifth, who was Joe Flacco. Why are we worried about Joe Flacco? Well, it's because once Zach Wilson is healthy, he gets that starting job back. But feel free to ride out Joe Flacco matchup dependent if you're streaming quarterbacks and need someone or in a 2 QB league until Zach comes back. To the running back position. Number one, no surprise, he's leading fantasy, Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns, even though with Kareem Hunt kind of sharing carries with him, I was a little bit surprised. I had him finishing top 5. Hey, it's still early in the season, but Nick Chubb finished first. Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers was second in terms of your fantasy points. And third, and this one is a surprise, Tony Pollard. We've been waiting for that transition from Zeke Elliott to Tony Pollard. Has that happened? Well, as far as fantasy goes, I think we all knew this was probably the year that Tony Pollard would take over. So he's really the surprise, but not surprised when it comes to fantasy running backs. The next crew is the wide receivers. And I've got one for you that I really, really like. And although I'm scared that the quarterback change that's coming might affect his production, I still really, really like the man who finished in fourth, which was Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. The top 3 guys, maybe no surprise, Stephon Diggs of the Bills, who looks to be a fantasy beast this year in that Bills offense. Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins, another one that, again, not going to be a big surprise, but maybe a bit of a surprise is that he and his counterpart, Jalen Waddle, both had huge games last week. Now, let's be honest. Those aren't sustainable in terms of long-term. They're going to have games like that. They're going to have 10 reception, 150-yard games with a touchdown or 2. It will happen more than once this season. Just, I don't think it's going to happen very often together in the same week like it did in week 2. So just be careful. I'm not suggesting you have Hill and Waddle on your squad, but I think you're safe to start either one of them every single week. Those are must starts. But Garrett Wilson is the one that, if you haven't picked him up on waivers, he's still available in a lot of leagues. Go ahead and pick up Wilson. He's someone you're going to need kind of in that flex position, or if someone gets hurt, bye week, those types of things that can give you a real shot in the arm for your team. So those are the top performers from last week. Here's what we're looking at, however, in terms of this week's starts and sits. So I'm going to give you one start. I'm going to give you one sit. And of course, I'm going to ask you to share your questions with me, Anthony K at sportsfluent.com. We have a couple this week, but we can always deal with some more. So here we go. The start of the week. This one's going to surprise you. And I picked the ones that are not necessarily ones that you would think of, right? Like we always know, hey, you're going to start Patrick Mahomes, right? You're going to start Josh Allen. Duh. So these aren't the obvious kind of starts. These are more for, if you're streaming quarterbacks, these are, like I said, for a couple of positions. But if you're streaming If you're not sure, again, if you're in a multi-QB league, a super flex, or perhaps you have a quarterback that hasn't been performing. Maybe you have Aaron Rodgers as an example, and you're like, hey, he's going into a tough matchup against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Maybe I've got this guy sitting on my bench and I should give him a start. So the start for this week, at QB, is one who I told you not to play him last week. I told you to run away as far and as fast as you can from Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings because he just hasn't been able to perform in primetime games. And we saw another one where he threw more completions to Darius Slay, than he did to his wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, when they were being covered. So Kirk Cousins this week, however, has a better matchup. He is a definite start. Feel free. Don't feel bad. Don't worry about what happened last week. Kirk Cousins is a start. To the sit. And you're going to think, what? You're crazy. You just told me to start Kirk Cousins, who had a horrible game last week. And now you're going to tell me to sit Tua, who had a phenomenal game last week? Yep, I am 100%. This week against the Bills defense, they're going to show you that Tua is not necessarily as ready for a team like this. Now, he will get better as the season progresses. He has wonderful weapons. I get all of that. But this is going to be Tua's kind of welcome to the NFL moment this week. I would stay away from Tua against that Bills defense. When we're talking about running backs, we saw something in the Chicago Bears game plan last week that said, hey, we get that Justin Fields probably isn't going to throw us to a victory. Although they couldn't beat the Packers, there was signs of life from that running game. We saw both Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery have great success running the ball. I think you're going to see that a lot more this week against the Texans. The Bears want to go into this game with a mentality of we're the favorites. We should win this game, as they should beat the Houston Texans. None of the players are probably still around from Lovie Smith's stint as a Bear. However, I do think the Bears will get up for this game, and I think a lot of that's going to do with David Montgomery, again, because they saw that success last week. So start David Montgomery. He's a good one against the Houston Texans this week. The next one, so the sit of the week, and this has less to do with his ability or how he was playing, because in week one he played fairly well. The issue is he got 43% of the snaps in week two, and a lot of those were taken away by two backups, in Seattle, Homer, and the rookie who we're all expecting to kind of take the lead there, and Kenneth Walker. So Rashard Penny is a definite sit this week. There are some leagues where I have him, and so I'm going to have to figure out what to do there, but Rashard Penny should be a sit. One of the questions we got this week, which blew my mind, was should I start Rashard Penny or Aaron Jones? And that's a no-brainer. You're starting Aaron Jones 100% of the time. You're never picking him over Rashard Penny. To the wide receivers. Well, I already told you Garrett Wilson's the guy to pick up. He's also the guy to start this week. Even though they probably, let's be honest, are losing to the Bengals, I feel like the Bengals are going to be up and are going to be up early. They have something to prove at 0-2 after a miserable loss to the Dallas Cowboys last week. So look for the Jets to be in throwing mode as the second half kicks off and Wilson to have another big game. I normally don't like picking wide receivers after they've had a big game, especially young receivers, because they typically have a letdown. I think this might be the exception with Garrett Wilson. The downside for this week, however, the sit of the week at the wide receiver position is one that, hey, I've never gotten on this train. I'll put it out there. It's on record. I've never kind of been a big fan of Brandon Ayuk's. However, the one chance that he had, because this again was supposed to be his breakout season, was with Trey Lance. With a bigger arm, the type of wide receiver he is, those two connecting is the one way that Ayuk had a chance this year. Now that Trey Lance is gone for the season and it's back in the hands of Jimmy G, which is better for the San Francisco 49ers from a team perspective, it's not good for Ayuk as a fantasy wide receiver. So this week, I'm sitting Brandon Ayuk. So please send me your trade questions. If you have questions, start sit questions, waiver wire, etc. send them to anthonyk@sportsfluent.com. And until next week, now you're more fluent.